Scratches is a game about a haunted house. Not haunted in the way you might think. There are no ghosts, at least not in the traditional sense. The house in Scratches is haunted by memories, haunted by secrets. But there's no haunting without the house, the gloomy mansion and its empty grounds. In the world of Scratches, this is all that exists. As you go down its hallways and garden paths and explore its rooms over and over, you almost enter a trance. You feel the house working away at you. It goes from inviting to ominous to oppressive. The loneliness sinks its hooks into you. The house starts to feel like the only place on the earth that exists. And because you're the only one inside of it, you become the only person on the earth who exists. Well, maybe not the only person. Scratches is a point-and-click adventure horror game from 2006, developed by the Argentinian studio Nucleosys. And by studio, I mean literally just two guys. There's other names in the game's credits, like the voice actors and beta testers, but essentially two Argentinian dudes, Alejandro Graziani and Agustin Cordes, made the game themselves over a 3-year period. Scratches begins with a cutscene of photos in a dingy bathroom turned darkroom, a gloomy mansion, a couple in Victorian dress, a chapel, and in the bathtub, a photo of an ominously cracked door. From there, our protagonist pulls up to the mansion we saw in the photograph and enters the gate. We play as Michael Arthate, a horror novelist who just purchased the mansion Blackwood Manor in rural northern England.
I arrived at Blackwood Manor one cold Saturday morning amidst a thick veil of fog. The weather didn't look good, and there was an unnatural calm surrounding the area, yet I soon became entangled with the place.
As Michael, we enter the house and immediately get a call from our friend and realtor Jerry, who helped facilitate the house purchase.
Michael, it's me.
Hey, Jerry, it's good to hear your voice.
I see that piece of junk you got there is working.
My thoughts exactly. I was afraid it'd fall apart as soon as I laid my fingers on it.
I absolutely love Arthate's voice acting. He kind of sounds like a deeper voiced Vincent Price, which fits the setting perfectly. At first I thought his voice sounded like an American voice actor trying really hard to do a British accent, but turns out he's American from HPL's hometown. So his voice actor is actually a British actor trying to do an impression of an American actor who's been living in England for a long time, which explains some of the idiosyncrasies.
No problem, I'll get back to you later.
Also, the voice actor for Jerry is Michael Boakes, an English game dev who made a horror adventure game series called Darkfall. I've never played the games, but from what I can tell, they seem very cool and a major inspiration for the gameplay of Scratches, so maybe expect videos about them in the future. Anyway, Arthate published his debut novel, but has since been struggling with writer's block and hopes that the Gothic atmosphere of the house can inspire him.
I'm telling you, I'm going to turn this place into a factory of horror stories.
Good. You ought to finish that book. I'm rooting for you, mate.
Anyways, now we're free to look through the house. Everything looks surprisingly normal, though the power is out, so you can't turn on the lights. There's a nice study and living room, bedrooms, an unfinished attic, dingy bathrooms, but for some reason the door to the basement is locked. There's also this strange gallery-type room that has all these African artifacts. It looks like one of the past owners was a collector. The odd thing is that there's a gallery display shelf with African masks, but there are only 3 masks, even though there are spots for 4. Exploring around the house grounds, we find a chapel, mausoleum, and greenhouse, all of which are currently locked. At this point, the player notices 2 things. The first is that the graphics are very primitive for 2006. The game looks out of the late 90s, and a lot of the environments and objects look like something you'd see on that old school 3D Renders Twitter account. But graphical fidelity shouldn't matter much if the artistic vision is good, right? And I think that's definitely the case here. The textures are really rich and beautiful and visually interesting. Also, like all haunted house style horror games, there are tons of paintings, and the usual suspects like Bruegel and Bosch make appearances here, but Alejandro also made sure each painting is only featured once, which I appreciated. So there aren't like 6 copies of the same painting in the house like there are in certain other games I can mention. All in all, despite graphical quality, the visual direction gets a big thumbs up from me. As you explore the house, rifling through dusty drawers of other people's stuff like the nasty little freak you are, you begin to discern 3 different residents of the house. One is a medical doctor who slept in the bedroom you chose for yourself. The other is a housekeeper who lived in a humble servant's room connected to the kitchen, but also clearly had a strong amateur interest in photography. In fact, the improvised darkroom you saw at the beginning is her bathroom, and the photos are those that she took. The last, and at this point most strongly formed character, is James Blackwood, a railroad engineer who built the house. Blackwood, whose name is probably referenced to the legendary weird fiction writer Algernon Blackwood, worked building railroads in South Africa, and kept up a pretty strong interest in the culture and history of the region. The African gallery upstairs is obviously his. That all sounds pretty par for the course for an eccentric rich guy, but you find a very odd note tucked away in his desk. In it, Blackwood talks about members of a strange tribe he encountered during his work trip in South Africa. The specific tribe was especially creepy and mysterious. They would watch the workers from in between the trees for hours as they did their work. Blackwood couldn't find out much about them, so one night he stuck to their village and witnessed a gruesome ritual that involved an ominous mask and ended with human sacrifice. The whole ordeal was upsetting, but it sounds like Blackwood's curiosity wasn't fully satisfied. The house honestly has a pretty cozy vibe on the first day. Things feel more melancholic than scary. While things are still pretty chill, now might be a good time to talk about the actual gameplay. The gameplay is somewhere between a typical first-person walking simulator type game and a typical 90s adventure game where you just click between static frames. The unique part is that though you're traveling between frames, each frame is fairly 3D, so you can look around and aren't just stuck with a static view. This went a long way in keeping things from getting too boring, but still, playing a game like this in 2025 is rough. I caught myself getting so annoyed that I couldn't just walk around like a normal first-person game because the 3D environment makes you feel like you can. Scratches is from 2006 after all, that doesn't feel like it's asking too much. But honestly, at a certain point, the incredibly slow, plodding gameplay actually started to kind of work in the atmosphere's favor. Crossing from one side of the house to the other took so long that you really started to memorize each part of the house in a way you couldn't if you were just sprinting from room to room. You enter this weird, almost trance-like state and start to notice the same tiny details. And let me remind you that though you talk on the phone to Jerry and a few others, there are no other characters you encounter in this game. There's this kind of lonely, trudging feeling that starts to work on you before things start actually getting scary. How long it takes simply to get around makes your sense of dread that much stronger. And there were a few frames, mainly going down the stairs, where every time I thought I was seeing something out of the corner of my eye. I don't think that level of atmosphere would hit the same if you were just booking around the house, like you drank 3 Mountain Dew voltages on the car ride over and were looking for the only working toilet. Now, the other aspect of the gameplay is the puzzles. Typically when I've covered point-and-click games in the past, I've said that the puzzles aren't too bad and don't require moon logic. This is not the case here at all. Half of these puzzles would only make remote sense to a mantis shrimp or a person suffering from an advanced stage of banana brains. I feel like I was going insane multiple times when the solution to a puzzle that I thought was pretty logical didn't work, and the real solution felt like something out of an anesthesia dream. They're not all this bad, of course, but there's just so much pixel hunting and haystacking and needle moments that I often didn't find the puzzles fun. As you solve them, each day progresses, so when time goes by, you know you're doing something right, but you might not know what you're supposed to do next. The esoteric puzzles sadly made Scratches a game that would be quite hard for me to recommend to someone to play for the first time in 2025, who hasn't had extensive experience with 90s point-and-click games. Anyways, you do some more poking around in other people's drawers and personal effects, which feels kind of weird, but hey, it's your house now. Lots of the doors you find are completely locked though, including this door to the basement depicted in one of the darkroom photos I mentioned in the cutscene. When you finally find your way down there, there's technically nothing wrong, but things feel off. The basement is cold and depressing, and though the rest of the house makes you feel lonely, you get a distinct unnerving feeling that you're not alone down here. We can't help but feel that it was locked for a reason. As we wander around the house, we miss the electrician and find out our car battery's dead. We of course bug Jerry about that new information immediately.
Let me guess. Michael.
Jerry, you won't believe this. It's insane. My car is dead.
What? Are you sure? Have you checked its pulse?
Jerry's starting to get annoyed with us constantly calling to get reassurance, and we get this pretty endearing portrait of their friendship dynamic. Of Michael as the annoying, overdependent artist, and Jerry as the practical one who has to talk him off the ledge.
But Jerry, I can't spend the whole night without one single source of light. I barely know this place, and I won't be able to find my way. Heck, I don't even know if it's rid of ghosts yet.
Are you a sleepwalker, Michael? You lie down on the bed, you sleep, you wake up, and you'll have tons of bright light then.
That's not helping.
In one of our calls, Jerry mentions a murder at the house.
There's also the murder.
You're kidding me. A murder?
An old-fashioned murder. You'd probably love the details, but sadly I don't know very much. It's old history, really. Although it caused quite a stir there in Rothbury. It seems the owner, Jane Blackwood, I think, went mad and killed his wife. I do remember the date, though. May 1963.
Faced with a night trapped at a strange house with no electricity, naturally, we peruse the stacks of old newspapers in the attic to find out more about the murder. We find a news story from 1963 that gives us a great deal of context into what happened in the house. Blackwood, the engineer, and the builder of the house, who was obsessed with Africa, allegedly killed his wife Catherine and buried her on the grounds. However, he was observed with the corpse by the maid Eva Mariani, who was definitely the photography-obsessed person living in the servant's bedroom. We also find out that a doctor friend of Blackwood, Christopher Milton, was involved in what seems like a cover-up of the murder. So we finally have a sense of who the main characters in the house's past were, but not much more to go off than that. With nothing else to do, we follow Jerry's advice and go to bed, though it doesn't feel like we accomplished much at all. We awake to hammering thuds. Are we still alone? The noises come from the African gallery. Nobody's there, and when we open the door, we find construction tools and a hidden door behind a heavy display case. Someone was boarding it up. We awake again. It's still night, and what we just experienced was a dream. Now, instead of hammering, though, we hear these loud scratching noises. The noises are louder near the fireplace in our room and even louder near the downstairs fireplace. They're coming from the basement. When we try to open the door, Michael says that as much as he wants to explore down there, it'd be too dark, though we know the real reason. Eventually, though, the scratching from the basement stops and we head back to bed. After a rough night, we wake up the next morning to a pouring rainy day. I had to say I was a bit relieved, as the back-to-back dreams / creepy nighttime occurrences had made me feel pretty uneasy. Walking around the house with the rain pouring outside and lightning occasionally flashing feels very cozy by comparison. Still, there's bad news too.
The better then, as I won't be able to come for you. I'm deeply sorry, but it's seemingly impossible driving to Northumberland, even less getting anywhere near the manor.
After some digging, we find a blueprint for the house that shows a room that doesn't exist on the second floor. Anyways, armed with this information, Michael, who won't even let us go outside because it's raining, uses an old rope he found to rappel himself down the attic turret into the secret room through the window. The mystery room is a walled-up nursery with all the depressing subcontext we'd expect. We can only check the newspapers in the attic for dates that we have, so now that we have the baby's birth date, we can find an article telling us that the Blackwood baby was stillborn. Seems like an oddly mundane and depressing thing for a newspaper to report about, but now we know 2 deaths tied with this house. Blackwood's wife and Blackwood's child, both of which have some mystery around them. Also, this is a small thing, but it's really odd that the picture of the Blackwoods is clearly lifted from a Victorian long exposure photograph, likely from the late 1800s, but apparently all this happened in the 1960s. The house was also apparently built in the 1960s, but it's suspiciously lacking in 60s interior design like conversation pits and avocado green shag carpeting. Instead, it looks like a place Zach Baggins would be running around with a night vision camera and an Inflection t-shirt on the Discovery Channel.
Now, is there any way maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, or you're... Whoa.
It's definitely a pretty strange choice and quite stark. Part of me wonders if the writer wanted the Blackwood storyline to originally take place in like the 1910s, but had to switch at the last minute for the story timeline to make sense. Anyways, a dead baby isn't the only big reveal on the second day. We go to the same wall in the African gallery that we saw being covered up in our dream, and after trying every possible tool in our inventory, we reveal a hidden door. Inside is a dark chamber with another African mask and notes in a letter left behind by James Blackwood. The letter reveals that the mask was stolen from the terrifying tribe he became obsessed with in South Africa. Blackwood believes the mask is charged with evil and is responsible for all the misfortune that has happened in his life, maybe referencing his baby's death. He's even started to hear the mask whispering at night. We also learn about the bizarre Dalmar tribe that the mask comes from, learning that they would apparently massacre and destroy entire villages of rival tribes, with no other motive than pure destruction and violence. So now we know why this room was walled up, as well as why there was seemingly a missing mask from the display case. Still though, I was kind of disappointed that the mask representing ultimate evil looks just kind of normal. There's so many better examples of scary looking African masks that you can see in basically any art museum. The one they use just kind of looks like a bionicle head without the mask on. So, dead baby, an evil African mask. We report to Jerry, but he doesn't sound very concerned and is in fact now just fully annoyed with us.
This isn't like you, Michael. This whole thing is really affecting you.
Stop being a drama queen. I'm a grown-up and I'm pretty aware of what I'm doing.
Fine, go chase around the ghosts of James Blackwood. I'll stay here in the room.
Anyways, there's not much left to do with the storm outside, so do what I do on most weekends and just go to bed after accomplishing nothing all day but wandering around your house for a few hours. Again, we wake up during the night to an eerie feeling. Unaware if it's another nightmare or a bout of insomnia, we walk back to the African gallery and check on the hidden chamber. The mask is gone. I'm gonna be honest with you, the jump scare of the mask just edited onto the head of a ripped black dude's body made me actually chuckle.
Come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth.
As I said, already the mask isn't particularly scary, and it paired with what looks like a shirtless model from the cover of an urban romance novel you'd find at the drugstore is way more funny than scary. Anyways, I guess that was a dream and now we're actually awake. The scratching noise is back though. Like last night, we can tell it's coming from the basement, but we have a lantern now. Down in the basement, it seems like the sound is coming from inside the boiler? I'll admit it, this jump scare totally got me. I'm not sure if it's because the atmosphere, although sinister, has been so quiet so far, or if it's just because of how bad the jump scare immediately before it was that this one got me hook, line, and sinker. I was like an inch away from the screen and not expecting anything to happen when this popped up. And then after I recovered, it sunk in that the feeling the game had been instilling in me for hours at this point, the assumption it had encouraged me to make was completely wrong. I'm not alone. Anyways, now that something sinister has actually happened and his safety is threatened, Michael is still as eager to play occult detective as ever. Jerry tells us to call the police, and when we refuse, he says he's driving up there.
Michael, for Christ's sake, you could have a burglar inside the house.
This is no burglar, Jerry. It's much more interesting than that, and I want to figure this out by myself.
Now that the storm is cleared and we have a lot more items, we can explore the rest of the grounds and the outdoor buildings. Exploring these other buildings and their puzzles is going to be more or less the majority of the third day. These new locations are all very moody and cool, and some even have their own score, my favorite of them being the chapel, but more on that in a moment. The puzzles, unfortunately, are as wonky and snake-brainy as ever, though. In fact, they probably are much worse here. But the only thing more annoying than doing convoluted adventure game puzzles is explaining convoluted adventure game puzzles, so I'll spare you that. We find a letter between James Blackwood's wife, Catherine, the one he allegedly killed, and his doctor friend, Christopher Milton. It discusses something horrible they did together that they have to keep secret from James. Could it be an affair? That might explain James killing his wife a little bit more, but why was he fine with Christopher, who kept living in the house, if that was the case? In the mausoleum, we find the family tomb. Anyways, like a normal person, Michael opens the coffins of James and his wife. But only one has a skeleton in it. Presumably it's his wife, since we know she was murdered, but what happened to James's body? In the basement of the crypt, we find more coffins, including one of a child, with a birth-death date in the same year and a name that starts with R. This is pretty clearly James and Catherine Blackwood's child. When you try to get Michael to look inside, he refuses because he doesn't want to look at a child's decayed corpse, which, I mean, he's got me there. Michael's a good character. Being a horror writer, he has this super morbid imagination, but he's still a fairly normal guy and doesn't have the alley cat morals of a normal adventure game protagonist. He's not going to look into a child's coffin just because you tell him to. I mean, Halligan definitely would have desecrated the baby's casket. Another building we have access to now is the family chapel, which has a really cool vibe to it. It's very dingy and has this unnerving, bloomy light coming through the windows with a very eerie, featureless wooden statue of Jesus. A quick puzzle opens a passage to a hidden study directly underneath the chapel. In it, we find more papers from James Blackwood, displaying an increasingly frantic and distressed state of mind. In one, he implores Dr. Christopher Milton to perform some kind of ritual and put aside his disbelief in the supernatural. He speaks about a curse that has ruined his life and even blames it for killing his son. Another entry makes it more clear the ritual that Blackwood is referring to. The Dalmar, the tribe he became obsessed with, were once the slaves of an evil god called Dolhorn, a god who would take the form of a shadowy feline demon. Only when the Dalmar trapped his spirit within a mask were they free, but even then they still had to perform human sacrifices and acts of bloodshed to keep the god's spirit appeased. Blackwood has since realized his grave mistake and the cause of his misfortune. The mask he stole from the Dalmar was the same mask that housed the evil god. He also describes the ritual for banishing the curse. Apparently you need a magic branch, part of a native plant, and an organic piece of both the victim of the curse and the victimizer, here meaning the god. So was Blackwood asking Milton to kill his wife to complete the ritual? Is that why they ended up killing her? He does mention that she's trying to stop him, but it's not clear what's paranoia and what isn't. At this point, we still haven't really experienced anything that is undoubtedly supernatural, though since we do own the house now, trying out the ritual probably wouldn't hurt. But how the hell do we gather all these ingredients? Anyways, Michael has a new theory of who he saw last
I
night.
think I know the identity of my intruder.
Tell me, who is it?
James Blackwood.
Jerry throws some cold water on this new theory, though, and a newspaper upstairs confirmed it.
Yeah, I have it right here. James Blackwood passed away on June 1963. Would you please stop this?
So much for that idea, unless he really is a ghost. You find the number of the old investigator in their case, and he reveals a lot. James Blackwood was never even charged for the murder, as he blocked the investigation. He also reveals the manner of Catherine's death.
And was ever determined the cause of death of Catherine Blackwood?
Yes, partly. Mrs. Mariani managed to see her throat was slit open. Ripped, she would say. It must have been horrible for the poor girl.
There's one more revelation in the phone call.
I mean Catherine Blackwood's body when you dug in the garden of the manor.
Like I said, they hampered the investigation. We never managed to set 1 foot inside the manor.
But are you telling me you never actually retrieved the body?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. Now, if you don't mind.
But wait, this doesn't make any sense.
So Catherine's body was never found. meaning the corpse in the mausoleum has to be James's, and Catherine is probably still buried. Gamers, it's time to dig up a body. Jerry is much less enthusiastic about our new plan though, insisting that we have to leave the house.
Goodbye, Jerry.
Michael? Michael! It's dangerous, do you hear me? Dangerous! You have to leave that place!
I'll keep you informed.
Right away, we understand why as we get a letter telling us we're being evicted. Huh? It seems like Jerry fudged something up during the purchasing process and the house doesn't belong to us. Was he ever planning on telling us? It's a weird story beat, but I guess it gives the impetus to get out of the house soon before Operation Repo comes to throw us out by the scruff of the neck. Anyways, time to break a curse. We have a picture of James Blackwood burying the body from the Italian maid Eva Mariani, so finding the corpse should be easy, right? Wrong. Not only is it super hard to make out which pound of dirt is in the photograph, I'm also almost positive this was programmed wrong because you can click the exact right mound from the picture and it's still wrong. Plus, when you get it wrong, you have to sit through the whole animation of shoveling the dirt and then filling it back in. Whatever. It's not like I wasted like 30 minutes doing this. Anyways, eventually we find poor Mrs. Blackwood's skeleton, confirming that since she died, she's never left the yard. Our reaction to this is to pull out her tooth? I don't know, maybe I was wrong that Michael isn't an alley cat. But I guess the plan is to use it on the ritual, and this is part of the victim's body we need. The part of the victimizer is a bit trickier. Now, we know to look for a tooth or something like it. The Dalmar god was described as looking like a large feline beast, so maybe we can find something in the African gallery. Indeed, we can pull the lion fang off a necklace to... Wait, I'm only just now realizing it's a lion claw, not a tooth. So a puzzle that already didn't make sense makes even less sense. Anyways, like a bad kid left at home by its parents all day after his Ritalin prescription ran out, we do some experiments in the kitchen and grind up the dead woman's tooth and the lion's claw in a coffee grinder. We combine the creepy tooth claw powder with the African plant. Then we take it up in the attic and cook it on a portable stove and it turns into a little compact ball. I can't emphasize enough how absolutely bizarre the train of thought needed to design the puzzle is. I mean, I felt like a tweaker on the last of my 9 lives trying to solve it myself. Also, I was missing one of the metal implements from the stove the first time I played this and had no clue where to find it, so yeah, fuck this puzzle. Anyways, stick the kidney stone we just cooked onto the magic stick and wave it in front of the evil mask's face. That was easy. The curse is broken. Guess we can just leave? Feels a bit anticlimactic though. The scratching noise is still here, and it's definitely coming from under the living room fireplace. Guess we can't leave now until we figure out for sure what it is. We climb down the fireplace and find ourselves advancing in a dingy subterranean chamber. The bear's neck is ripped out. Isn't that how Catherine Blackwood died? Okay, so the ending looks a bit goofy by our standards, but we'll talk more about it later. Regardless, we were never alone in the house. There was a deformed prisoner in the basement that had been scratching on the walls. This is James Blackwood's deformed son, Robin, the one we thought was dead, but was actually kept alive in secret by Catherine and Dr. Milton. There's parts that obviously don't make a ton of sense with the ending specifically though. Why were we just now able to hear the scratching noises in the day? Was it because we banished the curse? Also, I'm not crazy about the execution. There's this dramatic music sting right when we pass the living room, so I didn't even hear the scratching at all. I didn't know what dramatic thing had happened to cause the music sting in the first place. Why not just make the scratches way louder and no sting? Either way, our story's over. Michael leaves the house never to return. Those experiences in the Blackwood Manor certainly influenced his future success as a horror writer.
That disfigured face is still stalking my nightmares, and I've never put foot inside a Victorian house ever since. But there's certainly one thing that I'm grateful for. It was thanks to my encounter below that house that I was able to finish my book and become a prolific writer.
So what happened? Well, it seems that Blackwood and Catherine both had secrets that they kept from each other, and that Christopher was the common theme in both of them. Catherine gave birth to Robin, who was horribly deformed. Christopher kept this from James Blackwood, and he and Catherine hatched a plan to tell James that Robin was stillborn. In the meantime, James goes increasingly cuckoo and blames the evil mask for all his problems, including his son's apparent death. At some point, Catherine Blackwood, for reasons unknown, enters the basement and gets her throat ripped out, just as Robin did to his teddy bear. At this point, the ruse was up and James Blackwood discovered his son never died and was actually a deformed monster. He buries the body of his wife, and he and Christopher forbid police to come to the house and discover Robin. James dies shortly after, and Christopher continues to take care of Robin in his dungeon, reflected in the pricey bills for meat bought from a local butcher that we found. By the end though, even though Robin hasn't been fed in who knows how long, he doesn't seem to want to attack us at all. He's reaching out his hand like he just wants to touch us, that he just wants human contact. Let's not forget that Robin was only a baby when he killed his mom. Babies are self-centered monsters that just happen to be harmless. If they had claws and teeth, I'm sure there would be many times a day when they would use them at the slightest inconvenience. Perhaps he just got spooked by seeing his mom and attacked. Now he's an adult, forced to live his entire life in a dungeon eating raw meat, scratching his nails raw against the wall just in the off chance he can be heard. Monster though he may be, I think it's possible, even probable, that Robin is penitent. Also, the sound he makes when he shut the door. It sounds like an agonized voice begging no. Instead of attacking us, Robin may have been trying to embrace us. So the whole story was just one of human paranoia and betrayal, and the mask is just a red herring? I don't think so. Even if the mask business is meant to distract you from the hints to the fact that the Blackwood's baby never died, I would side with James that the mask's power did ruin his life. I mean, the mask infiltrates our dreams and we hear it laughing, but maybe it's just Michael being a bit too overimaginative. But still, remember all the weird goings on, all the plants dying and being unable to grow? And also, when we first glimpse Robin in the shadows, he has these glowing cat-like eyes. The god's avatar is described as taking the form of a feline. Maybe it's a fake out to make you think it's the god itself and not Robin, but I don't think so. It seems poor Robin was the spirit of the mask personified, or at least a baby that was infected with the mask's ugliness and savagery. But then again, we also find a vial of thalidomide in the bathroom, a medicine that was once commonly given to pregnant mothers as a treatment for anxiety and morning sickness, but that caused severe deformities in future children. I don't know, maybe it's another red herring, or maybe Catherine's womb got hit with a double whammy of horrific effects from dangerous, overprescribed pharmaceuticals and the charged spite of an eons-old malevolent deity. No matter what, I think there is indeed something supernatural here, though for once, the supernatural part is much less interesting to me. What is genuinely unsettling and interesting is the Gothic element, though. The madman is trapped in the house with you as you are with it. That's the unsettling part of Scratches. The sickening realization that we were never alone in the house. I think that is the single greatest achievement of the game. Because even though we might not be scared by the actual slightly goofy cutscene at the end, the fear comes when you sit down to think and realize what it implies. Why is this so powerful though? I think it's because the big reveal of the game was baked into every aspect of the game itself. Almost all the gameplay choices revolves around this one moment, this realization the player has. The scratching noises at night are only part of this. The clunky process of crossing the house lures you into a deeply lonely and trance-like state where you feel like the only person existing in the universe. The minimalist, single-minded music only enhances this trance. The deep shadows and the textures inside the house that make you think you almost caught someone out of the corner of your eye. The fact there is no other NPC to encounter or even talk to. The designers knew we needed other characters to get information out of, but that having other NPCs would fuck with what they were going for. So you have the phone. You can get more information and learn about your characters, but without any of the relief or comfort another human being there could bring. The idea is drilled into your skull throughout the entire game. You are alone. That's why it's so sickening when you realize you aren't. That you never were. There are some attempts at the writers framing this cosmic horror subplot. All the notes that emphasize how ancient and scary the Dalmar tribe are and reiterate over and over how unknowable and evil the mascot is. I don't find these too interesting though. Maybe I would if they were handled better. They felt a bit rushed in, and after all, they are mainly communicated through super dense note and a scary mask that doesn't actually look very scary. Plus, there is this kind of inherent ickiness to it of the evil, primitive African tribe obsessed with bloodshed and human sacrifice.
That's gotta be racist. There's no way.
Anyways, it just didn't really move the needle for me. It's probably also because what really impressed me about Scratches was the incredibly well-executed setting, and these story elements purposely try to take you out of that. The game also has a lot of Lovecraft references and thanks to in the credits. Now I have another video where I kind of dismiss Lovecraft's role in the game's story, and I'm doing that again here. There's a bit of rats in the walls, but not really. There's a bit of the outsider in the Robin story, but only the ghost of it, as we know so little about Robin's character. The human elements of Scratch's story, though, were much more interesting to me. The game feels so much more aligned with what I would consider Gothic horror, especially with the aesthetics and story themes. It's set in a decaying Victorian mansion, even if the mansion was actually built in the 60s, which makes no sense to me. But the game is abound in Gothic themes: family secrets, descents into madness, religion, birth, heredity. I was even reminded of the plot of one of the pinnacles of Gothic fiction, Jane Eyre, which, spoiler alert for a 180-year-old book, famously features a character imprisoned and hidden in an enormous house out of shame.
This is my wife.
The classic Mad Woman in the Attic of Jane Eyre inspired the freak in the basement of Scratches, even if only indirectly. Past Lovecraft, we can see a much more obvious influence in Lucio Fulci, an extremely notable Italian horror director who's credited right before Our Girlfriends. Oh, it's kind of cute. Anyways, Fulci made a movie called The House by the Cemetery in 1981. The movie features a family moving to a house which looks a lot like the Scratches house. It also features a child named Bob, which I just couldn't wrap my head around naming your child that, but whatever.
Bob, I'm talking to you. Bob!
Anyways, the house also has a deformed freak in the basement that is associated with a specific sound. In the movie, it's the rotting ghoul of a killer doctor. Also, man, doesn't this door to the basement in the movie look like the one in the game? I don't know, but they both seem to be charged with this understated malevolent energy. The movie is very weird, but creepy and haunting, and I'd recommend it if you can handle the post-production dubbing, which often verges on the unintentionally funny.
Keep away from the door.
Yes, I will.
Despite the slasher touches, I'd certainly call it a piece of Gothic fiction like Scratches. The whole movie is uploaded here on YouTube by this character, who honestly seems like a pretty cool guy.
Don't be late to your funeral.
Anyways, we have a movie that shares a lot of plot element with Scratches, but there's another movie, not thanked in the credit, that provides the other half. This would be Castle Freak, a 1995 film from Stuart Gordon. This also features a family moving to a new house, though in this case it's a decaying Italian castle. See, the castle has a secret also. The deformed scion of the noble family that lived there, who is imprisoned in the castle and is now a murderous psycho. The title of the movie tells you exactly what to expect. There is both a castle and a freak. Like Robin, he was believed to be dead due to a falsified childhood death and later kills his mother who covered up his imprisonment. There are a ton of similarities. I think you might kind of get now why this movie's director wasn't also thanked in the credits. Anyways, Castle Freak is an awesome movie, probably better than The House by the Cemetery, but it is very upsetting and gory. So gory that I'm not sure why it's even allowed on YouTube, but hey, it is. So you have some elements from The House in the Graveyard and some from Castle Freak. Well, what if I told you there was an earlier Castle Freak? One that may have inspired both movies and Jane Eyre. See, when I was a kid, I went to Scotland with my family and got a book about the ghosts and monsters of Scotland. One of those cheapo books you can buy at the train station and are tacitly marketed towards children, though the content is perhaps too unsettling for them. Anyways, I loved the book and probably read it through 3 times on the trip. One story that always captured my attention was one about the monster of Glamis Castle. Glamis is a remote castle in Scotland that is the ancestral home of the noble Bowes-Lyon family. You might not have heard of them, but the Bowes-Lyons were incredibly important. Queen Elizabeth's mom was a Bowes-Lyon and even grew up in Glamis Castle. Which is why it's so fascinating that since the mid-19th century, there were stories about a hidden dungeon at Glamis Castle that housed a horribly disfigured monster that was the rightful heir of the family, locked away for his deformities and savagery. Adding fuel to the fire, there was a boy Thomas, who was born as the rightful heir of Glamis, but according to records died right after birth and was never given a gravestone. Folktales about the monster spread across Scotland, and renowned visitors to the castle reported finding walled-up chambers and running into a creature in the castle's dark passages. There are even second-hand accounts of members of the Bowes-Lyon family acknowledging some vague, horrible secret. It's not clear which of these are out-and-out lies and which are legitimate experiences that have rational explanations, but regardless, it's easy to imagine. A secret chamber in the gloomy castle walls. The poor monster born into nobility and privilege, but doomed for eternal solitude. It's even more easy to imagine when you learn that 2 girls born into the Bowes-Lyon family, Nerissa and Catherine, were born with severe learning disabilities and kept secret from the public. Despite being the first cousins of Queen Elizabeth, the poor sisters spent their entire lives as secret, isolated in a mental hospital. These kind of things must have happened all the time. Though he almost certainly wasn't real, the monster of Glamis may have just been a romanticized symbol of people like these. Children rejected by their own parents due to a thoughtlessly cruel shame around disability. The story that captured my imagination as a kid is now just hopelessly depressing. Were Scratch's devs inspired by the story of Glamis Castle? I don't know. The childhood version of me who loved the story hopes so, but probably not. More than anything, I thought the similarities between Thomas Bowes-Lyon and Robin Blackwood were startling. Like, the monster of Glamis established this archetype of the deformed child locked away and kept secret, which then inspired other folktales, and then movies like Castle Freak, and then finally a game like Scratches. But perhaps even the Glamis Castle story didn't establish the idea, and it's older. Maybe it's just part of an elemental fear we've had for centuries, to imagine monsters in lonely and spacious forgotten places. That the secrets of a disgraced family could be concentrated in a single human embodiment of misfortune and shame and pride. and the poor creature is fated to become a secret itself. Scratches has a lot in common with its inspirations, but the impressive way that its themes and story are completely mirrored in the gameplay and atmosphere kept it from feeling derivative at all. The game is about 5 hours, give or take, and even though I didn't have fun during all of it, or even most of it, and even though I find it hard to recommend, I do think in many ways it is a masterpiece of atmosphere and setting, if nothing else. And again, in Scratches, the medium becomes the message in a way. All the weird gameplay decisions serves a purpose in the end. It tells a twisted, if not completely unique story whose main theme is the way secrets and shame will inevitably destroy relationships and families. And even if this story isn't completely special, I think the execution absolutely is. A lot of horror games borrow the tropes and visual look of Gothic fiction, but then throw it out the window when something more interesting like zombies or demons arrives in the plot. Even though Scratches sorta attempts to do this, I do think it stays true to these Gothic horror sensibilities until the bitter end, which I greatly appreciated. Scratches is a game about a haunted house. And it allows an old scary house to be just that, an old scary house. Because the game understands that sometimes there's nothing more unsettling than things that have been forgotten and neglected. Places, or sometimes even people, meant to be loved and cared for, but have been left to rot. And usually, those places are best left undisturbed. Chances are they were abandoned for a reason. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time, dear viewer. I wish you all the good fortune in the world. I remain your faithful snuggler.